So we're going to move to our Fireside Chat, which is session 4. This is with Jennifer Borchardt. Apologies, Jennifer, and Elif Ulbrich. Jennifer has over 20 years experience designing omnichannel experiences for financial services. She leads the digital transformation and strategic initiatives for U.S. Bank, Wealth Management, and Emerging Affluent. As Vice President of UX at Wells Fargo, she has led the evolution of bank brokerage and wealth management experiences, including digital brands and innovation. As lead producer at E-Trade, she led the design and localization of E-Trade's international websites. She was on the on-site principal in the company's European offices and worked with teams in Australia, Europe, Asia, and South Africa. Elif, who is a FinTech consultant, coach, author, and Contextual solutions. She is a Berlin-based consultant and author specializing in FinTech and LegalTech. She has a background in law. She's a qualified lawyer. That's an open-ended joke sometimes, but she's licensed as an active lawyer and business. Elif also contributes to several blogs and is co-author of the PayTech Book, the AI book, and the LegalTech Book by Wiley FinTech Circles. So Jennifer, Elif, welcome. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.
Thank you. Why don't we start with you, Elif? Maybe I know that we've talked about this with some of the other speakers, but at least to give a platform for this chat is why do we need conversational banking?
Well,
why are we even talking about it?
Excellent question. I mean, although overtalked, it's actually not overtalk. It's very relevant.
Right.
And so the question is, do we need this? Yes, we need it, but to what extent? And the reasons why. So when we start with the reasons why, it's of course all about utilizing tech and forming a new experience for customers. So basically improving customer experience with the means of tech. And this is not just, of course, giving a shiny tool for your customers, but also fulfilling their needs, automizing your processes, improving your processes, like decreasing costs, and comes with a lot of cons actually. And the most important of all, it's all about, creating new communication channels, and it's all about communication. As you know, the first wave of fintech came with a lot of digitization, which means we just saw a lot of neobanks, a lot of payment methods, a lot of, mobile banking channels, but there wasn't much communication. So we were just used to, typing in, we were used to, clicking on some buttons and then just having a result. But now we see we also need to humanize these experiences. We also need a human touch, like the new generation needs more communication methods. It is also vital for banks to improve retention, because if you cut the communication channel with the customers and you're just another app that, millennials use, then it's quite likely that they would disregard you for the next big thing. So you have to make sure that you communicate regularly with your customers, and then you have like a mean of communication with them. So you have an emotional connection with them. And that's why it is vital to use these kind of these tools, to enforce communication in the way they need it, to the extent they need it.
Right. I can see you nodding, Jennifer. And please feel free to, I don't want this just to be a one-way Q&A. If you've got something you want to say to the other, jump in and say, but I can see you nodding.
Yeah, I love what she said about humanizing the experience and fostering an emotional connection. That is so important. And this emotional connection needs to happen across all channels and all touch points. With something automated, having that emotional human connection is especially challenging, but it's not impossible. And I think Elif also touched on this. It can't be standalone. It needs to be part of something much larger and something more dynamic. So when thinking about conversational AI or chatbots within the context of an experience. How can you optimize the activities and capabilities of each channel and have them all work together in the best possible way? Conversational AI brings a lot of benefits, but it also brings a lot of costs, and there are some real limitations that need to be recognized.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for example, for activities where there's very common or very simple tasks for which a user needs assistance, and this assistance is needed in real time, chatbots and voice assistants are super useful. But once it goes beyond that, once there's a little bit more complexity, once there needs to be a little bit more dynamic thinking or just more of a human connection, at that point the experience needs to be situationally aware to be able to hand over the user seamlessly to another channel, most likely real-time human connection or real-time human conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll throw this to you, Elif, and Jennifer, you can follow up. Is I think what we're really talking about here is creating the conversational banking strategy, right? And how do you pick the right channels? Because you can't, we talk about omnichannel, and omnichannel sounds really, really cool to say, right? It's one of those HBS terms that everyone uses now. But can you really do them all? Maybe the answer is yes, right? Maybe you can. But how do you pick the ones, but you can't do them all at once? So how do you create that? And how do you choose it? I guess how do you pick the right channels, Elif?
Well, this is again another excellent question, and this is something that we have discussed when we first met. This is the answer is simple: by asking the right questions and by getting out of the hashtag mentality. So hashtag we're using AI, hashtag we're using conversational banking. Yes, you're using it, but why are you using it? For whom are you using it? So if we don't push the banks to get out of this mentality of, we have to use this now, and we have to advertise it so that everybody sees that we use it, it's just not a benefit for everyone. And to give an example, Germany is not necessarily leading digital transformation. And this is especially true when it comes to banking and financial experience. If you look at banks, they're more traditional because the customer base here is more traditional. They're rejecting change. And a couple of years ago, when these chatbots and robo-advisors were very big in US, of course, some German banks also wanted to try this, and they just wanted to implement it very quick. But this was a top-down decision. Someone from the board saw it, they thought it's a very shiny tool, and then they implemented it very quickly. But the results, it was a waste of time, waste of energy, and a waste of budget that nobody used. I'm not saying this is not something that they shouldn't do, but maybe the timing wasn't right, maybe the clientele wasn't right. Because now I see there's like a very, very small regional bank from south of Germany, Volksbank Lohr, and what they do is to use like a conversational banking tool, like web tool for their customers. And although this is like a more traditional customer base, a very small town, all their customers seem to love it. And this has created a big media stir, seeing, how did they occur? How did this happen? Well, the answer is simple. They just knew their customers. They asked their customers what they needed. They gave the tools that they needed, and utilized it with the processes that are essential for their customers. So this is the basics of strategy. Who are we creating this for? To what extent is this needed? And who will benefit from this? So if we ask these questions and we answer them properly, we have the strategy. Nothing else is needed.
Yeah. We talked about that last time we spoke. Was that Germans are this really interesting little market. They respond so differently than so many others. It's really it really is fascinating. So Jennifer, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think adding on to what Elif said, these experiences need to be user driven, and they also need to be purpose driven. It's not enough to offer a chatbot or any feature really just because a competitor is doing it, just because it's the newest thing. There needs to be a purpose. Asking why. Why does this matter? Why and how do we think customers are going to use this? How is this going to improve their experience? What institutions should do is to intelligently assess what technology is available, what should be made available, but then allow the users themselves to drive the experience and choose the channel when and how they need it. It can't be technology driven, it can't be business driven, it ultimately has to be user driven. And I think that the example of that regional bank is a really good one. You wouldn't expect a bank like that to be a success leader in some brand new technology, but they knew their users very well, and I think that's a big reason for their success. Another important piece of this is you need to be able to master the basics before you can go on to the really new and shiny things. If you don't have the foundation strong, if you don't get the fundamentals right, if you can't even support natural language, which right now I think we can consider basics, then really nothing else is going to work very well. If it doesn't feel easy and seamless and enjoyable, then users are going to find something else, and it's not going to be successful.
Yeah. The idea of having these types of technologies, user-driven or customer-driven. Elif, what is it that you think that maybe this is too broad a question or too fine a question? It's either one of those. It ain't in the middle. What do you think that that regional bank knew about their customers that said, let's do this?
Well, they knew their needs. They knew on which occasions the customers were contacting them. They knew what services were needed and how often they were needed, and the limitations of their staff. And they combined them all in a strategy, basically. And actually, it's just the chatbot, nothing more, that answers simple question, and that's all. It's not like it just drives the process any much further, but that was necessary, and that was sufficient for that customer base, and they understood it by asking their customers, by testing it on a small base, and then implementing it fully.
Yeah, and that's the key, isn't it, Jennifer? I mean, certainly we deal with this all the time. At the very least, the example, the bank example that Elif brought up is that they tried, right? They tried it. They had indicators from their customers. They had they had a need that they perceived that their customers had, right? And they believed that there was something in there that they said our customers will engage with this. Rest of the province, the rest of may not, but we think our customers will. Let's try it. How important is that?
I think it's very important to try, but I also believe that it's more than just trying something. It's not just throwing something at the wall to see what sticks. It's having data-driven decisions. It's having real conversations with your users and getting real information about what they're doing, how they're doing it, where are the pain points and where are the needs. And once you have those identified, once you have the why established, then that's when you can try something and be able to form a well-structured experiment, so to speak, and be able to get meaningful data to see where future enhancements can and should be made.
Sure, absolutely. After you figured out that you need to do it.
Yeah. I also think that for banking in particular, there are additional considerations that must be taken into account. Conversational AI and chatbots did not start with banks. It started with other things, and security,
customer-focused businesses. Yeah.
Well, I think every business every business that's successful is customer focused, but then they're
customer engaged, maybe, but maybe not customer focused.
Yeah, I would say these are primarily experience-driven companies, like say Apple. Apple was one of the best-known leaders with their Siri assistant. So that's great that Apple did that. But then when you apply that to banking, you have security, you have regulatory oversight that must be taken into account. It's one thing to be able to ask your phone, how do I get from point A to point B? The phone can talk back to you and say, take these streets and you'll be there in 15 minutes. But for banking, if you're asking about your account number, if you're asking about your balances or something that's very secure or sensitive, there needs to be some sort of flexibility in that experience where it doesn't speak back to you necessarily, because what if you're in an environment where that information cannot be shared? So the way that banks have addressed this, for example, this is just one example, is that if you ask something that includes sensitive information like your balance, it provides a voice acknowledgement that there's a response, but the response is only visible to you. It's not visible, it's not apparent to anybody else.
Right.
So if you say, what's my balance? It shows you the balance on screen, but it just says, here's your balance. Whereas if you were to ask your bank assistant, where's the nearest ATM? It could say the nearest ATM is at this particular address. So those are the nuances that need to be taken into account when you're using these types of engagements for extra sensitive information. And this applies to other industries too. Healthcare, for example. Anytime someone has sensitive information, there just needs to be additional consideration for the experience.
Right. Which in the last couple of minutes that we've got here together, the next question seems to be trust. What are the trust considerations, or how do you build trust into this? And we'll take a minute each, and we'll close it out. So Elif, why don't you respond to that? Your thoughts?
Well, so trust, of course, comes with compliance. It would be a typical lawyer's answer, and you would hear it from me.
Yes, I forgot.
Of course, as a bank, working in a regulatory environment, in a highly regulated environment, you are compliant. But of course, this becomes more sensitive if you are working with third-party providers, or if you are maybe not establishing your own chatbot, but using a social media tool for conversational banking. For instance, you're using a WhatsApp or something, and then you see that actually these standards, this tool doesn't have the standards that you need for this market. Then of course you need to come up with extra, extra measures. Come up with extra solutions, and if you see that this tool isn't fulfilling your needs, but you have to stay on this tool because this is what the customers prefer, just maybe include a hyperlink or something, just use this tool to just lure the customers to your platform, and then start the conversation from there. So there are many creative ways which could be discussed on an ad hoc basis, case-by-case basis. There's not a one-fits-all solution. But of course, the first start point for trust is data privacy and cybersecurity. So getting all these standards right. But one other aspect that I find really crucial is the education of the customers, because no matter how compliant your platform is, no matter how compliant your solution is, if the customers don't know about it or don't understand it or fear it, it's not relevant. So the trust element isn't complete. So you have to educate the customers as well. You have to let them know, not just by these emails that they don't read anymore and they delete, but take your time to, come back to understanding your customers and find solutions that, work in a way that can educate them, that can make them understand that the risks of these platforms, of these conversational tools are very low. So, they won't be exposing themselves because you're already compliant. And I find this also a very important element of trust. So yes, implementation, but also education comes hand in hand.
Right. And Jennifer, we're running out of time, but maybe 20 seconds. Your thoughts on?
I think speaking more generally, using this effectively is a very delicate balance between convenience and ease of use and security and privacy. So going beyond banking, going beyond voice assistants, you have these devices, the Google Home or Alexa. They're always on, and that makes it very easy and convenient to use. But then there's a lot of concerns that the company is collecting too much information that may not intended to be shared, and maybe this is just something in the United States, that this information is being shared with the government or some other institutions that some people do not want to have any sort of engagement with, and
Right.
They don't want to share their information with them. So there's always this fear, and because there's still some distance between the user and what they're interacting with, I don't think at this point there's ever going to be a 100% level of trust. There's always there may always be a little bit of question.
Absolutely, and we'll leave it there. Thank you too. I appreciate your time. That was good stuff.